In the first part of our time together tonight, I want to explore with you why telling the truth is so crucial to our work as artists. So telling the truth in our work. And I'm going to remind you about Thomas from the Bible, who helps me think better about that. And in the second part of our evening together, I want to explore with you a little bit about how we think about our work and our making. And I want to remind us to tell the truth, especially to each other, about our work. And I'm going to remind you about Joseph from the Bible. So the first part is about truth in, and the second part is about truth about. And these two halves, as Melody mentioned, are going to be broken up by what I hope will be a fun writing exercise. It is actually going to be using a template that is literally kind of a fill in the blank writing experience. So I've seen it pull forth beautiful work from non writers to well published authors. It never gets old. It always works. And I promise you now that no one will be forced to share. We're not going to come knock down your front door and make you share, but you will be invited to share your first lines of this writing exercise. And I think actually you'll be amazed at what you're able to create. So let's dive in. I love the story of Thomas in the Bible, the disciple who famously doubted. Some people call him Doubting Thomas. I call him Honest Thomas. And we even named our youngest son after him. Thomas was the one who said things out loud. He brought his insides outside in a way that was helpful for everyone. I don't believe it, and I won't believe it until. And then, of course, Jesus shows up and says, put your finger here, put your hand there. Then scripture says that Thomas says these beautiful, important words, my Lord and my God. And then, of course, Thomas preached far and wide. So there's a couple things that we can pull from this story as artists. One is that Thomas was bold and courageous to say what he was really thinking, especially when he was standing literally in the middle of a room of people who seemed far more certain than he was, who already seemed to be fully on board and maybe didn't share his question. Although some of the other disciples might, in fact, have been sinking back into doubt and reluctance by then. So maybe he actually wasn't the only one in the room. And we rarely are the only ones in any room with a particular question, I have learned. The second thing is Thomas's vulnerability and transparency did not just serve Thomas, it served the kingdom and the body. And it was actually redeemed by God. God used it. His brave choice didn't just help him, it helped everybody. Jesus met him in his honesty, and we all grow because of it. This is a beautiful quote by a writer I love, Anne Lamott. And she so helpfully says, if something inside of you is real, we will probably find it interesting and it will probably be universal. So you must risk placing real emotion at the center of your work, right straight into the emotional center of things, right toward vulnerability. Risk being unliked. Tell the truth as you understand it. If you're a writer, you have a moral obligation to do this, and it is a revolutionary act. Truth is always subversive. And I would say if you're not a writer, but you're an artist of another kind, you can just replace those writing words with, paint toward transparency then. When we tell the truth in our own work, and that can take an extra dose of bravery in a world that rewards pretending and in a faith that can sometimes breed pretending, we help everybody. This is another quote from a writer I really appreciate, Dani Shapiro. She's a memoir writer. And she says that in the very act of writing, and we could again broaden that out by saying any kind of making or creating, we are attempting to make sense out of what we can, to reach out a hand to the reader across a rough sea of isolation and separateness, and offer up something that has shape, integrity, even beauty and symmetry. Here is something important, I think. When we view our writing or our art making as exploration, when we allow ourselves to set out not certain of where we are going necessarily or where we're going to end up, that can help our work. So Shapiro's attempting to make sense hints at art making as a kind of journey and exploration, which I think is right and which always leaves room for honesty and questions. So we can create to discover, we can make to know, and we can write to understand. So this posture of humility helps our work, especially I think when we're writing about spiritual things. My own posture lately, and I this is for me, this is what helps me write about these things, has been ponder, don't preach, explore, don't explain. That's what I tried to do in my book, and it helps our honesty for me. So your process might be even more terrifying when you do it this way, but I think your art will be even better. And if you're writing or creating as a spiritual student and not as a spiritual teacher necessarily. So when I wrote The Minister's Wife in a very secular writing environment, one of my faculty mentors told me once when I got a little preachy and over explainy, I don't like it when you try to teach me. I like your stories. Thank you, I said. What a gift she gave me. Another mentor told me to blow up my formulas. Another gift, a little harsh, but helpful. And it really did help my writing. I wanted to share with you this piece of art that I bought in New Brunswick, actually, by a New Brunswick artist, Amy Ash, that I discovered in a little art gallery in Fredericton after my book came out. I saw it and I recognized right away what I think my writing is right now, and maybe what your writing is. And that is a gathering together of a small group of people who recognize themselves in my fear-filled honesty about life in the church. And I say fearful because I am afraid, but I'm choosing to be brave anyway. So I want to talk about bravery in honesty for a moment or two, using the work of Makoto Fujimura in his beautiful new book, Faith and Art. So he writes, at the heart of our journey toward the new is the resurrection vision of God. Every art recognizes that the work must be broken to be made new again. Minerals must be pulverized. Characters of a play must be tested beyond bearing. A dancer's body will be broken over and over again for that one miraculous leap. In that journey of brokenness, we experience something that transcends the brokenness. I'm just going to pause and say something I meant to say at the beginning, and that is please use the chat to, throw ideas in, ask questions, whatever. We will get to them after, and we really want you to do that. So I should have said that before. So this other wonderful quote of his, when making honors brokenness, the broken shapes can come into focus as necessary components of the world to come. This is the most outrageous promise of the Bible, which is at the heart of our journey toward the new. Not only are we restored, but we are to partake in the co-creation of the new through our brokenness and pain. And in this book, Fujimura calls artists border stalkers, which I really loved. But what I find in this wonderful reminder from him is reassurance that, again, our brokenness, our transparency, our vulnerability is not wasted. And it's not about us just sitting in a bunch of, grief and bad feelings. It's actually moves us toward a new place. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about how I sort of ended up doing that in The Minister's Wife, just to use it as an example. So I'm calling it my own fearful honesty, or the times I was not hit by lightning. So there are a few parts in the book that were especially, where I felt especially vulnerable, and because I was being particularly honest, I think. And so the first part is from a women's retreat I went to that was not very fun for me. I didn't like it. And I ended up feeling like I was, I guess more sophisticated than the people there. That's the lie I told myself. And I was in a room where there was a coloring activity going on, but I wasn't doing that. Of course, I was working on my writing. And then I had this thought go through my head, which was, I am the smartest person here, floated through my mind like a dark and horrible cloud. Did I say that out loud? That's a phrase from the book. It's so embarrassing to admit that, and to write about that honestly, like, it's like doesn't shine very well on me. Another scene was when my husband and I went to visit the previous priest of the church he was now at, and they lived in conditions that I didn't want to live in, and I didn't like their apartment. I felt like they were, living in at a level of poverty that frightened me, actually, as we headed into this calling, and they were kind of coming out the other side of it. And we left that very small apartment, and I turned to Brent and said, "We are not ending up like that." And then later I say I would make a very good rich person. So we'll never know that, but that was another confession in my book. During the copy editing of The Minister's Wife, one of the editors trying to help me, and I really appreciate it. This is how books get written. There's lots of a tug of war sometimes with the editor, but she came back to me and said, around the "we are not ending up like that," just a little note in the side that this is very off-putting. People aren't going to like you. And based on this, in this moment. And I knew that was a risk, but I chose to go ahead anyway. And then in a chapter on disappointment, Brent had applied for a job in New York City that I really, really wanted. I really wanted to move to New York City. And he did not get that job. And I had a moment with God on a road in our neighborhood where I finally admitted to God, I thought New York City was our reward. And as if we were in a conversation in the middle of the silent road, I heard, "I am your reward." And I said back, "You are not enough." And that was a moment of confession for me that marked, and lament, that marked a turning for me back toward God and back toward joy eventually, and toward release and healing. But I had to be completely, I had to say the worst thing. And so the reason I share these is that these are probably the examples from the book that scared me the most when the book was about to be published, because I was really afraid of how people would respond to me, and that I was alone in thinking such bad thoughts. But of course, we're never alone. And no one said to me, "Shame on you." No one has said, "You're a horrible person who never should have thought such a thing." Most people who have said anything at all have said thank you. And so you're never the only person in the room. It helps us to know we're not alone. And when we confess to God, we're forgiven. When we confess to others, my experience has been that we are befriended. We aren't alone in the room after all. Someone turned the light on, and it was you. So this is a lovely quote that I found very helpful about writing as a spiritual discipline, from Stephanie Paulzel. "The best writing emerges from generosity, the desire to meet and nourish another. No matter how inadequate our words may seem to us, in our struggle to find the right ones, we make room for others to find words of their own." So we are in each other's stories. And when we tell the truth, we offer other people a home in our stories. So I really find that a helpful way to think about telling the truth in writing. So we're going to move into a time of writing. So this ends the first part of what I wanted to remind you of this evening. And so this break to create is using this wonderful writing template, which I found online. I think it's been around a long time. It's called Where I'm From. And it evokes in writers memory, beauty, wonderful metaphors of your story. I shared it, I did this exercise with a young writer I'm mentoring, and I wanted to read you a few lines of hers just to give you an idea of what can happen with this writing exercise. Not to put pressure on you, but I actually believe very deeply in reading a lot as a writer and not being scared of what other people write. When I started out as a writer, I thought I would, change my own writing too much, or that I would just be so intimidated by what other people create. So, but now I'm just inspired, generally speaking. So her first line from her piece was, "I am from an old worn pot, stained by spices and peppers, simmered into luscious stews." And then it goes on. And later she says, "I am from suitcases packed with courage and little else." I don't know how I came across that little exercise, but I just love it. And it really, I think it takes the fear factor a little bit away because you have this template, but it really just, it's different for everyone, obviously, because we all come from different places, but it's always a beautiful thing to do. So I wanted to build off metaphor a little bit because, of course, really you are all playing in metaphor, I think. Um, and talk about how coming up with our own metaphor for our work, for our art, can help us remain true to who we are and remember who we are and what we're trying to do. So that's what I want to explore with you for a few minutes. So my metaphors have changed for my work. And I used to think about my work as, and this is probably going to sound weird, but as sculpture, actually. And that's when I was doing a lot of writing of feature articles. And I would do all the work of research and interviewing or whatever. And I would spend a lot of time going through that all again. And I had this image in my mind that I was trying to find the natural shape of the work, the structure that was already there in the work, and that my job was to just chip away at it to create this article or piece of writing. Today, that feels very cold to me, like marble. And my writing has changed, and so has my metaphor. So now I have a much softer, more inviting metaphor for my work, and it involves home and table. So my metaphor is my work as table and inviting new friends to sit right down and have a conversation. So it's writing as hospitality. It's so different. It's kinder, it's more invitational, it's more welcoming, it's less certain and solid, it's more fluid and tender, I think. It's less predictable and permanent, which is much more reflective of where I am as a writer. The metaphor of table also acknowledges the role of other people in our work, their input, the ongoing conversation of it, the interaction, and the beauty and the mess. And I can think about setting a beautiful table or a simple one in my own home, nourishing with hopefully a good meal, and listening as well as talking. So in this wonderful book, which I highly recommend, Charitable Writing, Cultivating Virtue Through Our Words, the authors say, and if you're not a writer, try to replace your own art with the word writing, if writing isn't your thing. Following the law of love, we must seek to be gracious hosts. Yet we must recognize that a reader is also a kind of host. Readers receive our writing, bringing it into their homes, giving it their time and attention. The challenge of charitable writing, then, isn't simply to be a good host, it is at the same time to be a good guest. Our aspiration must not be simply to love others through our writing as if we are all sufficient. With all humility, we may earnestly hope that our writing will be an occasion to be loved. I love that quote. And if you think about Jesus, he used metaphor all the time in his parables, like the sower scattering the seed. And here are some other metaphors for writing that are referenced in charitable writing: baking bread, barn raising, weaving, mining, knitting, gardening. So what I would love for you to think about, right now, but just this might be an ongoing thought conversation for you, is what is your metaphor? Um, and if you want to, if something comes to you right away, or if you resonate with chipping away at marble or table, or if one of those ones I listed off strikes you, maybe throw it up in the chat and let other people interact with it. And you might give some other people some ideas. And in charitable writing, the authors also talk about the undergirding virtues of your metaphor. So what are the characteristics that make that metaphor work? So for me with table, it's probably obvious, and I've kind of said it already, welcoming and hospitality are virtues, generosity is a virtue, listening is a virtue, exploring and risk-taking are some of the virtues that I try to think about when I think about my writing. So it's not that I've figured it out already. So these are some of the other ideas. My painting is what if you're Patty's an artist. I wonder what her painting is for her. Maybe it's an open door or something. My
Visual voice.
What's that, Patty?
Visual voice.
Okay, beautiful. That's beautiful. My screenplays are what? My pottery is this. When I create, I'm building or shaping my writing desk is my boat or whatever. So just think about how you think about your work, and it can be a way to kind of keep you on track. So yeah, again, throw them up into chat if you feel like it, and let us cheer you on. So speaking of cheering each other on, I'm going to come back to that idea in a couple of minutes, because cheering each other on as people involved in creative pursuits is really, really important, because we might not have an arena full of other people doing that for us. So we talked about Thomas and his truth telling in the first part. And now I want to remind you about Joseph. Favored son, guy with the great coat, envy of his brothers, sold into slavery, and then rose up out of that into a place of, a position of prominence in Egypt. So this is from Genesis 39:2. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master, and he put him in charge of his entire household. So I'm an Enneagram 1. So when I was reading this recently, I'm doing that read the Bible through a year, and it brought me back to Joseph, whom I hadn't visited with for a long time. My heart, my Enneagram 1 heart leaped within me, literally, when I read that Joseph succeeded at everything he did, and that it had a lot to do with bringing order to things, and also pleasing both God and man, and everybody saw it. And then Joseph ends up in jail, if you recall, and there he steps into his role as dream analyzer and tells some of Pharaoh's men what their dreams meant, and he gets it right. Again, pleasing. Success, again. And then scripture says that in Genesis 40:23, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. For 2 years, Joseph was forgotten in jail. And when I read that this year, just a few weeks ago, I felt a connection with Joseph in a way that I never would have felt before. In that line of Joseph being forgotten about for 2 years, I thought of all the artists whose work is not recognized or remembered. And I thought of all the people who create and people who don't give them another thought. And I thought of my own sort of greedy, grasping desires for my own work. So I thought about disappointment and a general lack of fanfare. I thought about Twitter numbers stalling, and all of us who haven't yet built a big faithful tribe on Instagram who wait for us to go live and share about our crazy day. I thought about not buying an RV from the sales of our first books, like someone very silly dreamed of late one night. Of course, Joseph kept doing his work anyway, and he probably got the whole jail organized and healthier. That's what I like to think. He did his work in the most discouraging of settings, whether he was recognized or remembered or renowned. So we do what we do because we were made to do it. Our motivation can't come from our success. In other words, don't give up. So Danny Shapiro, again, writes, my guess is that it's the very act that is generative, the doing of the thing that makes possible the desire for it. A writer sits in her writing space, setting aside the time to be alone with her work. Is she inspired doing it? Very possibly not. Is she distracted, bored, lonely, in need of stimulation? Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt, it's hard to sit there. Who wants to sit there? This is her habit, her job, her discipline. She practices because she knows that there is no difference between practice and art. The practice is the art. So understanding that disappointment will be part of our experience as makers, we need to understand that. People will forget us, ignore us, look over and past and around us. And we need to look ahead of us. And we need to make room for all those real feelings and just learn from them. Because disappointment is a given, and perseverance and endurance is a requirement. And perseverance and endurance create all kinds of beautiful things. So waiting will be part of what we do. Brewing, stirring, thinking, walking. There will be long gaps when nothing happens that we can see. So telling the truth about our work to each other can help us in the work of our work. We can help each other by being honest with each other. It's so easy as creative people to feel competitive, to feel insecure, to feel like you're an imposter, a failure. And then 5 minutes later, feeling like you've just created something magnificent. And then the next day back again. I don't know one single writer, or I'm going to guess artist of any type, who doesn't ride that ego roller coaster. Our own mothers might let us down. Mine didn't. Yours might. I know a writer whose mother has never read his work, he shared. This is a grown adult person. People who you think will embrace your work won't, and people who you wouldn't think would will. So that's the wonderful beauty of it, but it can be hard to live through that. So what I've been trying to learn to do is to keep steady, to not ride the highs too high or the lows too low. I'm trying to walk a road and not ride a roller coaster, and to find friends to walk with me so we can help each other. So I want to end with offering a few thoughts on finding an art buddy or a whole gang, hopefully. So back again to Makoto Fujimura, he points out in his beautiful book, Art and Faith, that Jesus assigned his disciples to travel 2 by 2 because the borderlands are dangerous places and it's lonely there. So who is standing beside you in your work? Who can you ask to stand beside you in your work? Who can you collaborate with? Who can be your writing buddy or your painting partner? My best work has always been done in community. I wrote The Minister's Wife during an MFA with workshopping going on, and later intensely and annoyingly with my very good editor. I work with a writer named Patricia Patty often. We wrote Craft, Cost, and Call, How to Build a Life as a Christian Writer together. Craft companions can help us be brave. Are you being mentored? Are you mentoring? Who are you cheering on right now? Who can you open doors for? Who can you encourage to take risks? And who can encourage you to take the risks you need to take for your work? Are we being a good citizen of our craft country? Do we buy the books, recommend the artist, attend the openings and the launches? Do we cheer each other on? Do we share other people's work and successes on social media along with our own? Who in your life isn't an artist? Ask them questions about their work and what they love. Listen. They also have a lot to teach us about how to approach our own work. In Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, she says, I sit at my desk and I work like a farmer, and that's how it gets done. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if a farmer said, I work like a painter and that's how it gets done? I mean, maybe a farmer would say that. This is a great little book, How to Be an Artist. And I loved this quote. Every good work of art has courage in it somewhere. That I know we all know that that is true. And so I just want to encourage you in the beautiful work that you have been given to do. And I hope I've reminded you of what I'm sure, deeply know already, to tell the truth in our work and tell the truth about our work to other people who need to hear it. This is from a beautiful poem by Mary Oliver, her poem, Sometimes. This is just a little snippet. Instructions for living a life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. So my kind of benediction to you as we close down this part and just move into some Q&A if we want to do that is, may you pay close attention. May you be astonished at least weekly, and may you tell about it truthfully and well. And I wanted to just throw that little slide up before I stop screen sharing. We never ever work alone. So I just wanted to show you some of the books that I've been, that have been feeding me lately, and some of which I quoted and referred to during our time together.